where do people like me belong in that conversation with these everyday habits of transforming systems?
I love reading the newspaper. I've read the New York Times every morning for 50 years. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking about what those other people are doing. What the President of the United States is doing, what the President of South Africa is doing. It's really a waste of time. It's really a waste. It's good to be informed, but I think the trap is, or I'll say the trap I fall into, is to spend a lot of energy thinking about what those other people are doing and what they ought to be doing. I know this is an odd way of putting it, that I don't exactly mean it this way, but you'll get the point. That's what they want us to think, that there's nothing we can do. And so the question I've been trying to get my head around is, in where we are, what can we do? So it doesn't start with saying, what can I do to restore sanity to the global trading system? Probably nothing. But to conclude from that there's nothing I can do in the spheres where I have power and responsibility, or where I have agency and influence. My organization, my family, my town, my department, my circle. This book is about 7 habits, and some of them were very familiar to me, and they're ones I've thought about and written about a lot. In particular, collaborating with unlike others. Habit 6 is something I've written a book about already, and experimenting way forward. It's a big part of Rios' methodology. But there's a few things I had really never thought about, or hardly thought about. And so they're more interesting to me. I think should read all the chapters, but they have a lot of energy for me. And in particular, I wrote a chapter called Acting Responsibly. And I was originally going to put that at the end, because, if you put something at the end, it's sort of a sweet thing to say towards the end of the book, leave people with something very philosophical. But my editor, the great Steve Piersante, and my granddaughter, Siobhan Wilkinson, who did all the illustrations in the book, 26 years old, both said to me, you've got to make it the first chapter, that everything starts there. And it was very good advice. And so I think this is, for me, the hardest question, and for that reason, the hardest chapter. Yes, you can read the New York Times. Yes, you can think about what these other people ought to be doing. But what is your responsibility? And what I say in the chapter is, I took it as far as I took that question as far as I could, which isn't very far. But I said it's not a recipe; it's a riddle. But I think it's an important riddle to say, okay, given where I am, my role in the systems of which I'm part, what constitutes responsible action. And just now, while I was waiting for it to start, I found a quote, because this is the quote that brought it home. I worked on a project, or Rios worked on a project of which I was a contributor in India in 2016, and it was a project on child malnutrition in the state of Maharashtra, getting actors from public, private, community together. And anyhow, to make a long story short, it was a disaster. And it was all blamed on me. And I spent every day for 6 months being upset and plotting how I was going to get revenge on these people that had unjustly... I knew I had made some mistakes, but why didn't they look at what they had done? You can imagine. And then I came across the following paragraph, which I pasted onto my note, because I came across this paragraph by accident, and it's by Martin Buber, a pamphlet written by Martin Buber, not one of his major books. But I've never read a paragraph that was so piercing, in at least where I was at that time, and it's exactly this point. So that's why He says, it's just one paragraph, he says, this perspective in which a man sees himself only as an individual contrasted with other individuals, and not as a genuine person whose transformation helps towards the transformation of the world, contains a fundamental error. The essential thing is to begin with oneself. And at this moment, a man has nothing in the world to care about than this beginning. And the final sentence, any other attitude would distract him from what he is about to begin, weaken his initiative, and then frustrate the entire bold undertaking. This idea that these 2 hours I spend every morning thinking about what Mr. Trump ought to be doing is really distracting myself from the much harder question about, okay, so what am I going to do today? And I'm not saying, and the book is not saying, if you change yourself, the world will change. Of course that's not true, or I don't think that's true. But that's where we have to focus our attention, and that's what Steve and Siobhan told me, why it had to be the first chapter, not the last chapter.